I'm so excited to have Kim Kelly on today of all days. This is the day. Kim Kelly is a writer and organizer based in Philly. She has a labor column in Teen Vogue, and her book, Fight Like Hell, The Untold Story of American Labor. We're going to be doing a long conversation about that one soon. Is it out? Is it official? I know I have it.
No, April 26th.
April 26th.
Like less than a month.
Very exciting. Well, the union gods have blessed us with you and our previous segment before the Amazon. I mean, we had no idea this was going to happen this way. So
Dude,
what a day.
I've been dancing around my kitchen listening to Wu-Tang all morning.
I love it. I'm like, Chris Smalls, man. Wow. It was obviously an effort, but determined. I mean, I saw some of the texts that were sent out. If our audience doesn't remember, Christian Smalls is an Amazon worker who left, or who was fired, excuse me, for challenging Amazon during the beginning of the pandemic because of a lot of what we now know was going on internally, from not being able to go to the bathroom to so many other things. But all right, this is what I want to do with you, Kim, if it works for you. Can we talk about the arc of what Amazon workers have been through, including Bessemer, but probably more specifically these workers in Staten Island from that moment in the beginning of the pandemic to today?
Wow.
Well, I mean, Cliff Notes version.
Cliff Notes. And I do have to preface it by saying a lot of really incredible reporters have followed the Amazon fight at JK8 very closely. I'm not one of them because I spent the whole last year writing a book and covering this coal miner strike in Alabama. But even the past few months, like since the formation of the Amazon Labor Union in Staten Island, it's been kind of a whirlwind. We've seen Amazon pulling out all their tricks, like, surveillance, calling the cops, trying to intimidate and bully the people organizing, trying to kick people out, trying to smear organizers like Chris Small in this case, and the things they said about them. I'm amazed that no one's caught hands for the kind of things they said about him. And just seeing this all unfold against the backdrop of this rerun election in Bessemer, which, as we know, last year, workers there attempted to organize with RWDSU. Amazon did what Amazon does and busted the hell out of the election and scared people. And, they got the result they wanted, but the NLRB was monitoring it and they ruled that, due to unfair labor practices, they were due a rerun. So one thing that's just such an incredible strike of, like, I guess, fate or happenstance, or maybe the labor gods are just up to something. The ballot counts for both elections happened on the same, or started on the same day, which was yesterday. I feel like every labor person in the world was just glued to Zoom all day trying to see what was going on with these ballots. And, what happened with Bessemer, it's still, they can't catch a break because it's still complicated. The initial count came out with Amazon, like the no votes, I think about 150 no votes ahead of the yes votes. But there are these 416 contested ballots, which will impact the election. So now they have to schedule a hearing to go through those. Like, we're not going to find out what actually happened there for probably a week or two. So that's a cliffhanger. But in Staten Island, they were able to do an in-person election, which seemed to have a big difference. And that turnout was massive and the victory was decisive. Like, this is building on months and years of organizing. We still need to shout out Amazonians United in Chicago, who are doing their thing independently. And I'm sure there have been so many years of groundwork laid by organizers trying to crack away at this giant.
So it's so interesting to me, and we've talked to Christian many times on the show. Determination, calling him from the parking lot, never stopping. But they decided to create their own union. Staten Island, for folks who may not be aware, Staten Island is part of New York City. It's one of the boroughs of New York. We should start off with that. New York City is as union town as you can get in the United States, and by the way, still has problems. RWDSU, the leader, is based here in New York. And And I think a lot of folks were like, oh, that's interesting. And Staten Island has a lot of union workers, even though Staten Island is a little bit more conservative as a borough. There's a lot of firefighters and teachers and police officers, and there's a huge Amazon facility, and many, many other public sector employees. So it seems this is like a really interesting case for me, because when Bessemer happened, there were some questions about, well, what went wrong, and why did they choose Bessemer first, RWDSU, and why didn't they go to Staten Island instead? But Christian has said they wanted to do their own union. What's the kind of logic behind this? Can you help us understand how this stuff works?
Well, I mean, in the case of Bessemer, RWDSU didn't, roll up and say, hey, let's unionize you. A worker at that Amazon facility called them. Daryl Richardson, he had experience with unions previously. He was working there for a while. He saw the lay of the land, was like, okay, we got to do something. And he went online and he basically just tried to find the most applicable union, picked out RWSU and gave him a call. Wow. And RWSU actually happens to have, the Mid-South Council has an office in Birmingham, which is only like 20 some minutes away from Bessemer. So that part kind of worked out.
That's great.
But I think in this case, it just comes down to what the workers decided to do. Like in Alabama, the workers decided, okay, we're going to hit up these guys, this union, we're going to get involved with them, we're going to throw in our chances with this institution. And then in Staten Island, workers decided to take things into their own hands, and that worked. That worked. There's obviously a different climate, like organizing in the Deep South in Alabama versus organizing right outside Manhattan. Like New York City is a union town. Birmingham used to be, right. But thanks to decades of legal nonsense from conservative politicians, it is a little less. Though I will say, no, that's a different thing. I was thinking of a different strike, because there's a lot going on.
A lot of strikes.
Yeah, I'm thinking about the coal miners who are just down the road, but this isn't about them today. It's interesting just seeing, honestly, I think a lot of people in the labor world are sort of gobsmacked about what happened in Staten Island. Like, very excited, but also like, what
did we do wrong? Yeah.
Well, not even that, but just like, well, how did they pull this off? Like, there's all these established playbooks that people use. Like, oh, this is how you do this. This is how you're supposed to do this. And these workers were like, okay, that's cute. Here's what we're going to do. And then they won. So what does that say about the playbooks?
That's what I'm saying, is there's something very, let's have a real conversation about labor in this country. Labor's obviously been under attack for decades, always. And I shouldn't say just for decades, always. A lot of labor is sort of entrenched with this establishment in union states, like in New York. There's a lot of that happening. Because of the conditioning of neoliberalism and whatever, there's probably a little bit of a mindset in some unions, not all, of being afraid to take major risks because of the ramifications for many reasons. Do you think that maybe it doesn't necessarily directly relate to this situation, but do you think that mindset has maybe stifled some of the more gotten folks leadership used to kind of how you fight these strikes and efforts? When, do you see what I'm saying? Like, it's like you become conditioned to it after a while.
Honestly, I feel like a lot of the old guard have forgotten how to fight.
There you go. She says it much simpler. I'm saying it with, I'm trying to I'm like, I don't want to have like Stuart Applebaum calling me up tomorrow.
Oh my, what a
judge of me.
I love Stuart, but not every union is a fighting union anymore. Not every union has had their fighting union moment, but a lot of them used to be a little more used to getting out there on the ground and organizing and getting down there with the people and really focusing on the nitty-gritty stuff that makes unions so important. Throughout the movement, we have this kind of classic case of there's the more entrenched establishment generation that has the way they see things, the way they want things to be done. Mm-hmm. And then there's younger, newer generations who are coming in with different ideas, different approaches, and different perspectives on what a union can and should be doing. We've seen that play out. Like, look what happened with the Teamsters. Yeah. The Hoffa dynasty has ended.
Amazing.
Which is
can you explain that for folks?
Yeah, just for like the Cliff Notes is essentially the Teamsters held well, this organization within the Teamsters of rank and file Teamster workers called the Teamsters for a Democratic Union that were challenging what they saw as a fundamentally undemocratic way of choosing their leadership, of keeping certain people and certain families in power at the expense of the members. And over the past year, there was this massive effort to change that. And now they have a brand new international president who's already making some interesting moves. And I mean, the Teamsters are about as old school and classic a union as you can get. And if they're shaking it up, maybe that means that other unions out there might have some food for thought, we'll say.
Well, and honestly, it's good for them. It's even good. I mean, if you want to go down to like the rawest of human aspects, like even for those in power at the union, it's good for you to be able to exercise and use your power. You know, if you have a union which is there to negotiate power in the rawest of ways, why not exercise it so that
getting out there, like with the UAW with their one member one vote campaign, like members are not, I don't want to say fighting, but members are pushing back against some of this established structure and established order and saying, well, like our voices should be just as important as anybody else's in this union. This is our union. We're the union. I mean, that's the principle that we're seeing in JFK and Amazon. Like it was utterly impossible for Amazon to use the classic trope of like, oh, the third party, like, oh, this union's coming in to mess with you. Because the union was just Chris and some of his friends. Like it's literally us.
Do you think because of that? Oh, I mean, like, there's so much to this. I'm so fascinated with, and I hope someone writes a book about how they did it. Maybe I don't know. To me, this is like reading about the Cuban Revolution. Like, I know that sounds silly, but it's a small gang of folks who took on Goliath. And do you think like the militancy of being a small crew that obviously built out played a part in not?
I mean, it sure seems like it. I mean, even I saw labor reporter Louis Leon saying, you know, just remember, like Chris Smalls is an incredible organizer, but he's just one guy. There's an organizing committee of about 20 people who were part of this effort, and 20 people can get a lot of shit done. And it's harder to break up smaller groups. It's harder to say, oh, these people don't understand. These people. Well, that's just like Jeff and Krista. Like, what do you mean these people? Like, you can't break that down. That was something that Amazon tried to do in Bessemer, saying, oh, this New York union is coming down here to mess with what you got going on. And like,
that's a little, there's some tropey there, stuff there too.
Yeah, there's a lot complicated. And one of the and then literally like they had an office in downtown Birmingham. So first of all, and also like it was being led by workers. Like Daryl made the call. Daryl and Jennifer and Perry, those people formed the organizing committee. It's different flavors of the same thing. It's just complicated. It's wild.
Do we know now? Like, are they gonna? I mean, first off, what happens next?
I have a tweet to show you.
Yes,
well, please. I can't show you because we're on here, but I just saw this as I was waiting to jump in to talk to you. Again, there's a whole article, but who reads those?
As somebody who's actually writing them.
Yeah, you know, listen,
it's called a lead for a reason. Get it in the first paragraph because they'll never make it.
Honestly, here's this, and the important part is essentially the Amazon spokesperson told CNBC.com that we're disappointed with the outcome of the election in Staten Island because we believe having a direct relationship with the company is best for our employees, because that's worked so well before. An Amazon spokesperson said, we're evaluating our options, including filing objections based on the inappropriate and undue influence by the NLRB that we and others, right, including the National Retail Federation and U.S. Chamber of Commerce, witnessed in this election. So they're big mad. And they're apparently trying to tattle on the NLRB, which is a
oversight
law enforcing body, not a union. They're just mad at labor in general.
I'd love for Biden to cut all of Amazon's contracts with the government. Let's see how this plays out, buddy.
That'd be great for everybody.
I'd like to have our subsidies back. You know, all those tax dollars that went to your penis rocket, Mr. Bezos. I'd like to have those taxpayer funds back. It'd be really wonderful.
Dig your little facility up out of South Philly and get the fuck out of my town while you're at it.
Exactly. The warehouse down the street from me, you know. So is it possible now for ALU to be duplicated, like for them to grow as a union and become a union, like a large national union?
I guess it really depends on what they want, right? Like if they want that. I guess in purely hypothetical terms, I think there's so many lessons to be learned from them and the approach they took. And I mean, it's such a
Mm,
beautifully simple idea. Like, okay, we're going to get a group of people together and we're going to decide to do this. Like, you don't have to go through established structures to be a union. Like,
that's right.
you and a group of coworkers fighting together is a union. You don't
That's
need
right.
like the official stamp of approval. I mean, the IWW has been out here saying that since 1905. You know, the Amazonians United in Chicago have kind of brought that into the Amazon conversation years ago. And I mean, the concept of solidarity unionism exists.
Hmm.
And I think a parallel in a way that we're seeing is if you think about what's happening with the Starbucks Workers United campaign, like they are affiliated with Workers United, which is affiliated with SEIU, so they have that institutional backing. But the way this movement is spreading is pretty much worker to worker.
Yeah.
Like we got four stores already here in Philly, and when I spoke to some folks who work there, some of the organizers a couple weeks ago for the Nation, and they were telling me like, yeah, we had like we're on Discord, we have group chats, like there's other things in the works. Like we're just
Hmm.
talking to people. I got a tea the other day walking home, and I stopped at a Starbucks and asked the person like, "Hey, are you guys unionizing?" And they were like, "We're trying."
They're like,
So
Kim, we know who you are.
well, I'm like, I was in my gym clothes. Nobody, I didn't want anybody to see me. But but they're and I was like, "You're gonna do it," and they're like, "Yeah." Like that, you can't
Yeah.
buy that. You can't replicate that inorganically. Like when the workers want to do something,
Yeah.
they're realizing like, oh, we can just do this. And I think that's huge.
And it's going back to the Bessemer thing for a second, because I grew up in Buffalo, New York, and to see the Starbucks workers and Michelle's Eisen is amazing, and all of the workers and organizers there. But these are the Starbucks I went to as a kid. I mean, like I would like sneak out of class and go get a frappuccino on Elmwood. Where I have a lot of memories of that. One time I got in a car accident. I couldn't make it back. Couldn't make it back to school because I got in a fender bender because I was skipping class.
I
Sorry,
mean,
mom.
whom among us?
Sorry, mom. I really needed that frappuccino at that time. Anyways, the side note. What's really interesting is these successful these recent success cases, or really active ones in Chicago, in Buffalo, in Philadelphia, in all over the Northeast, really, and of course Staten Island. These are what union towns. I mean, these are towns that either used to be much stronger. There's a union influence, union culture, but goes back to that point about Bessemer. There were a lot of questions over whether or not that was the most fertile place for RW or anybody to like really do the first effort. I still think it was great. I think the more the merrier. Do it everywhere. It's not like ranking them, but does it seem like if you come from a union town, the chances that you're able to cross that cultural divide that might exist because unions in the South have been like completely wrecked. You know what I mean? Like if you grew up with a dad that was a union worker or a mom or whatever, you're more likely to get it.
I mean, I would say if you come from a union family, I think
Mm,
that makes a big difference. Like
that's
I'm third generation union and I'm very proud of that, but not everyone in this country can say that
yeah,
because of the way unions have been kneecapped over the decades. But
right.
when we talk about what a union town looks like, I think
Mm,
I don't know if regular people who aren't necessarily following all the news think of things that way or know what
right.
that means. Because if you live in New York and you're not in a union and you're just going to work and trying to survive in an expensive hellhole of a city, which I lived in for a long time, shout out to the hellhole. But like if you're trying to get by and you see a random article saying, oh, of course, New York City is a union town, everyone knows that. And you're like, well, no one can afford to live here
Right.
and homeless people are being treated like garbage and our mayor is like an absolute freak who does not care about workers. Like, what about this means union? Like, so unions have headquarters here, cool, but what does that mean to me? I think like it like having I think the union town designation means more to people in the movement and maybe in media than it does to normal working
Mm-hmm.
people. And I would love to see that change. Like I want it to mean something to say, we're a union town. I think Philly does a pretty good job with that because we have people who actually work to make that happen. Like Helen Gim and Kendra Brooks, a lot of people in the city council are actually
Mm-hmm.
doing the work. Like we were talking earlier about the idea of the sort of informal or like worker-fronted union. It made me think about Dorothy Lee Bolden and the National Domestic Workers Alliance that she formed back in the 60s. And that wasn't an official union, but she changed the lives of thousands of workers and organized them and helped build up education and got involved in voting rights. Like, and now that organization still exists. And in Philly, a year or two ago, they helped get passed legislation that essentially is like the most progressive and helpful domestic worker legislation we've seen in a minute. Domestic Workers Bill of Rights. Like, that's real. That is being a union town. Like, you can't just put that on a bumper sticker and be like, yeah, unions are cool, we're down. Like, you gotta mean it. And in the South, like, there's a lot of unionists in the South who are trying to do the same thing. Birmingham has this really incredible history of industry and strong unionism and strikes, like going back to the mine mill and before. The UMWA is just down the road. Like, it's, I think that some cities and areas maybe lean on the idea of, oh, but we're pro-union, without backing it up, and that's not really fair. Like, you can say that you can say it, but you got to be about it.
Yeah, and that includes, part of it is exercising power as a union. If you're supporting a politician, Eric Adams, or people in the Senate or City Council of New York, then you also should flex and say, like, we need you to do more.
Do something.
Do something. New York City Council, hey, you're so progressive, do something. Everyone's getting evicted. Maybe stop taking real estate money and rezoning your neighborhoods. And,
People who are houseless have jobs too.
That's right. The majority.
Right? Like that, a union town should not be treating its people like garbage just because it isn't paying them enough to have a house. That's right. That's on you.
Oh, but the oligarchs, they deserve to have their pied-à-terres.
Right. Oh man, imagine how bad Jeff Bezos' day is. Just, oh my god.
He's just,
just bathing in oligarch tears.
I'm sure he has some disco party that he can go to just, shake it off. I don't know if you saw that. Horrible.
Rich people are such freaks.
They're so weird.
Why? What's the point? If you're gonna be so weird, just get a job. Just chill out.
Just weird. It's not like the artist would, like, they think they're artists. It's this Burning Man crowd, and then I always felt weird around them. I'm like, you're not actually. There's something weird about your art. It's not art to me. This is not making any sense right now, and this is more of a reflection of my work with my documentary right now. I'm around all these like crypto Burning Man bros, and I'm like,
man, that is
like, it's like capitalism on fire, and I'm like, you're doing mushrooms for the wrong reasons. It's not to take over the world.
Dude, this is why I'm glad I come from the heavy metal world, where like nobody has money, but we all have a good time.
That's what I'm saying. All right. On that note, Kim Kelly, thank you so much for joining. Go pre-order Kim's book. We're going to have her on at the end of April.
Talk about the Untold History of American Labor. Got to get the plug in.
There, you got it. Right there. All right, Kim, have a wonderful, go celebrate.
Yeah.
Go celebrate. Enjoy.
Time to pop some bottles.
Exactly.
Like Chris Smalls, he's already on top of it.
All right, guys, if this is the time, if you haven't already, make sure to join us on patreon.com/The Nomiki Show. Our patrons are what keep this show alive and well. It's how we can do it on the road when I'm filming other stuff. It's how I can, honestly, seriously, it's how I can take all this gear with me on the flight because it's expensive to check those bags. Our patrons make sure everything happens. Make sure we have David working his butt off. That is how our community grows, because we can't rely on the algorithms. We know that the algorithms in little places like YouTube and Twitch and all the different spots that we release our show to, you just never can predict. 1 month you're doing kick ass, the other month you're down a certain percentage. It is patrons who keep us going.